Hello, true believers. Are you a fan of the Thunder Road trilogy? How about Graveyard Mind? I have the author, Chadwick Ginther, on the episode this week, and we talk about the writing process, we talk about gaming, we talk about the influence of gaming on writing. It's a nerdy as all get out podcast. Been wanting to get Chadwick on the show for quite a while, and we finally did it. And very excited for this one. This is one that was on the books for a while, and here it is. Very, very excited.
When I'm not drinking bourbon or writing blues songs, I listen to the Sean Geek podcast over on SeanMcGinnity.ca, and you should too.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sean Geek podcast. Say hello, Todd.
Hello, Todd.
Today we have a guest, illustrious writer from Winnipeg by the name of Chadwick Ginther. Say hello, Chadwick.
Hey, everyone.
So, Chadwick's someone that I wanted to have on the show for a while. Someone that Corey Taves pushed me to have on the show. Someone Dylan Lee pushed me to have on the show. And here it is, finally. I finally had the gall to ask you.
All right. Well, I'll have to pour Dylan a glass of whiskey, and I already put Corey in one of my books as a tokerization, so I don't know that he's getting anything else from me. But.
No. I think he's got enough already. But yeah, he needs to add you in his strip is what he needs to do.
Yeah.
Actually, Todd is going to make his debut in the strip within the next couple of weeks. He's coming in as the muscle. I can't wait.
It should be
It's going to be wicked.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of drafts, so it looks pretty good.
I like, when I'm in there, I'm jacked. He always draws me jacked, so I love that. I'll take that any day. So Chadwick, the reason I wanted to have you on, and this is the format of the show, we don't really, it's not interview style. We don't have a lot of guests on. We just want to have a conversation about stuff. Now, from talking to Dylan, Dylan is a huge gaming nerd, obviously. I'm a huge gaming nerd, and I know that you are a massive gaming nerd. Big comic book collector, ditto. And you have a predilection for Thor and that sort of stuff, which is damn cool.
Yeah.
So
all those things.
Do you want to just kind of pimp your stuff a little bit, and then we can get into storytelling?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the author of 4 novels and about 20 published short stories right now. My first series is the Thunder Road trilogy, which reimagines Norse mythology happening on the prairies in contemporary times. It follows an Alberta oil worker who gets caught up in some of Loki's shenanigans and ends up getting tattooed with a bunch of the powers of the Norse gods. So that's the first book series. Then there's Graveyard Mind, which is necromancers and spooky stuff, also set in Winnipeg. After Tombstone Blues, the second book in the Thunder Road trilogy, I don't think I was quite done with dealing with the haunted side of Winnipeg, so I wanted to lean into that a lot more. So I went with a little more horror influence for the second fantasy series, and that's kind of what I do. Most of my writing is mythology influenced. Pretty much all fantasy of one stripe or another, whether it's contemporary or sword and sorcery, epic. Don't really do a lot of science fiction, so that's what I write.
Cool. Todd, what do you got there?
I was just going to
Looks
say,
like you're percolating
so
something.
you've got one that's just been released today, Swashbuckling Cats.
Yes. I have a short story in Swashbuckling Cats, 9 Lives on the Seven Seas, which kind of started as a weird thing on Twitter. The editor of that anthology was joking about how she had pitched another anthology to her publisher, starting off the conversation with "Yar," and she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm very professional," and it just kind of became this: people sending her cat gifts, people sending her pirate gifts, and then she was joking that, "Oh, I should just do a swashbuckling cat anthology," and I found this gif of a Norwegian forest cat with an axe and a Viking shield. And I'm like, "Oh, you have my axe." And I'm like, "I don't know, this anthology is never going to happen." And then there's an open call, and I'm like, "Well, I egged her on. I better give her a story." And so I decided to write an in canon, in my Thunder Road universe cat story.
Oh, so it's actually in canon. Oh,
yeah, it takes place. It takes place during the Viking Age, so it's well before any of the Thunder Road stuff happens. And it's the protagonist is a ship cat after all of the sailors on their longship have been killed, and the cats are kind of staring into the eye of the storm. And the first line of the story is, "Well, we're fucked." And,
so when you were doing with Thunder Road and this whole mythological bent that you got going on, like I'm a huge mythology fan. In fact, I ran a Marvel Superheroes RPG game, like the old phase rip system that eventually.
I'm running that right now.
Are you really? Oh,
yeah,
cool.
I've got a phase rip game that I decided to set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Nice.
Yeah, the campaign kicked off. It started basically just post Civil War. So the Sokovia Accords are there, and Spider-Man has just shown up, and he's the inspiration for why these heroes are hiding their names and their faces.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. Did you switch? Okay, Todd, we're going into full nerd here.
I'll let you guys go for a few minutes.
Feel free to interject, Todd, at any time.
Okay.
Todd's the straight man always. He's a geek about music more than we ever could be. But
I'm more of a PC gamer type.
Oh, okay.
Less tabletop stuff.
I will break him one day, though. That's my goal. So were you a fan of the old phase rip system, like from way back in the day? Like, why did you go back to it?
One of the first games I played after D&D. My high school gaming group played a ton of Marvel with that system. I've always felt that it captured superheroes in comics very well. I've tried a ton of other superhero systems since, and I've never found one I liked more. Although I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but there's one called Tiny Supers that I really like that I backed on Kickstarter. Very minimalist system.
I haven't even heard of that one yet. Okay, I got to look for it then.
Publisher is Gallant Knight Games.
Writing it down.
They do. I found out about them when they did a Mechas and Monsters game.
Okay.
And I really liked that game. I played their Tiny Dungeon, which is like a minimalist fantasy game. Love all their stuff. But I haven't had a chance to play their superhero game yet. And there's another one that just came out. I backed on Kickstarter called Spectaculars, which seems like it would capture comics very well. Like you built the city as a group, and there's various roles and like power cards, and I've read the box set, and I've watched a couple of live plays, but I haven't had a chance to get it to the table with my group yet. Looks promising.
Okay. Did you ever play a Bash?
No.
It was meant to be kind of like it was very much in the vein of Marvel Superheroes role playing game, like the original phase rip. Not bad. So you probably gave Mutants and Masterminds a go?
I did. Never ran that one. I played in a few sessions of that. Tried Villains and Vigilantes. Variant. Don't think I ever tried Champions.
Yeah, I haven't tried Champions either. I tried Villains and Vigilantes. I was actually, so I don't know how this happened, but I got in touch with Steve Kenson, the guy who wrote Mutants and Masterminds, like for Green Ronin.
Yeah.
And we actually were part of the play test for one of the modules, which was, to me, that was like,
that's pretty cool.
It was like I met David Bowie or something, you know? it was that level. We were running the phase rip system for so long, and then Mutants and Masterminds came out, and we just moved everything over to it. And that campaign ran for 10 years. And the reason I'm bringing it up is the whole culmination of everything was that the gods had come back, and they were running everything behind the scenes all along. And that was the culmination of the end of the campaign, where all these supers are popping up, and it's all because the gods have set it up. So it was, when I heard about Thunder Road, I'm like, oh man, that's like Marvel superheroes here. Like there's something going on like that. It's pretty cool.
I didn't even realize it at the time when I was writing it. I thought I was writing like another urban fantasy, like Dresden Files or like the Mercy Thompson books. And it's like, yeah, my guy's going to get some powers and this and that. And I realized that like I made him a superhero.
He totally did.
So like he's a superhero. And then I kind of like looked back at some of like my formative reading, which was not, I mean, I read a lot of fantasy, but in terms of a contemporary sort of fantasy, all my formative reading was Chris Claremont's run on X-Men. And I'm like, okay, well, a lot of this is his fault then.
Yeah, it's all his fault.
It's all his fault.
The book I'm writing now, it started out as it was just going to be a book about kids in trouble and that sort of thing. And then, you know, lo and behold, Chris Claremont's fault again. Like, damn it. It's like, they got superpowers. All right, I just went with it. And once I let go of that, I always felt like I'm not a real writer from writing comic books. That was kind of always what was pushed on me. And I'm like, fuck it. And I just went with it. And I'm actually having a lot of fun with it now. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
And I wouldn't be a writer. Don't know if I would be the reader I am if it wasn't for comic books. Like they were what got me reading. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I want to talk about Marvel superheroes some more. I want to talk about this campaign you're running. So is it, so you're using pre-established characters, so all the characters from the movies, and that's who your players are, or?
No, they made up their own characters. I gave them the option of introducing an existing Marvel Comics character that has not been on screen yet, or they could make up their own character. And everybody ended up doing their own characters.
Cool.
I was kind of imagining it was going to be more like the Defenders, like Power Man, Iron Fist, Daredevil kind of levels. But I tried something new for character generation. I had them roll randomly with the old Ultimate Powers book.
Yeah.
But we did it as a draft, like a snake draft style. And so I rolled an extra character worth of attributes and powers and things. And then everybody went through snake draft style and picked what they wanted from the rolls.
Oh, okay.
So somebody would be like, I really want that. It's like, if I take that roll, I'll have monstrous strength. I want that. So they were taking rolls and applying it to whatever their character type was, whether they were an android or an altered human or whatever. And so
what's the max level then of any power or ability?
The highest power rank, the highest power rank anybody has is amazing.
So you do have amazing. Okay.
But in attributes, we've got a few in monstrous level, and one person, because of their template got a bonus to their reason. So we actually have one character with unearthly reason, so they're as smart as the Watcher. It's ridiculous. Like they're like, would I be able to figure this out? And I'm like, well, you're smarter than anybody that could possibly exist. So sure.
So to give Todd some perspective here, so the names of the ranks are all kind of adjectives from the comic book. So like the lowest is feeble, and it goes feeble, poor, typical, and then the higher end
be typical, right?
Typical, yeah. The kind of the high water mark is unearthly, which is 100 points. Mm-hmm. Amazing is 50. Incredible's 40. I still remember all this stuff.
Yeah.
But
how long that stuck in my head when I wasn't even playing the game.
But do you find so here's the question. Like when I'm writing anything, do you go back to that table, the phase rip table, and go, that's a remark, that's a good, that's a tip? Like, is that when do you build that way at all? Character creation?
Not typically. I mean, when I first started trying to make up characters, if we weren't randomly rolling, I would look at their chart and be like, okay, Spider-Man is this agile, or, Wolverine is his intuition is this good. So how would my character conceivably stack up against that? I did that when I was doing a little bit of character creation, but not often. I don't really do it when I'm building villains. I found it sticking out. That chart would stick out to me when I was reading comics after I played the game.
Yeah.
Or I'd be like, that clearly weighs more than 10 tons. I don't think he could have lifted that. Right? Like,
oh God, yeah, I do the same.
It's like, oh, he flipped that car way too easily.
What do you think of that? Marvel had that resource book. It was not the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, but it was like a later thing. It was a handbook that came out probably like 10 years later ish, and it actually provided like levels to all the stats. Yeah. Do you remember that?
I vaguely remember that. I had the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. I still have the black and white reprints, the bind-ups that.
Oh, really?
But they're just like newspaper stock.
Yeah.
White,
like the essential line sort of thing.
Yeah, and like so out of date now. But it's still awesome. And like you look back at that, and there's like John Byrne and Walt Simonson art, and
yeah. Like they actually got the top
that day, right? So.
Yeah, they got the top artists for that. I was collecting. I don't have them all, but I have probably 60 or 70% of them, I think. But that was always my resource when we didn't have a character in the role playing game. I would go to those books to try to, create it, right. And usually, the more obscure character, the better. And I think that's how I got into my love of the Marvel Legends line, like the action figures was. Oh yeah, there's that weird guy on page 42 or whatever. Is like, who's this Spy Master guy or who's
Or like that's those handbooks are why I like Paladin to this day. Like he's just
Paladin, yeah, man, from the Avengers.
Yeah, he's like he was a mercenary and it was just like amazing. And
he wasn't a real Paladin.
No, he was a mercenary with a weird kind of puffy purple costume.
Yeah.
And goggles and
he had a thing for the Wasp.
Yeah. And I think the other character I ended up liking because of this was Diamondback from the Serpent Society.
Oh man!
And like when Gruenwald was doing his Bloodstone hunt run, and then Diamondback became like a recurring character in Captain America for ages. Like that was awesome.
So you have the Captain America run, then I take it.
Yeah, I got that run. I ended up buying Gail Simone's Domino run. I was a huge Domino fan from the X-Force days, but I liked the art on the cover, and Gail's usually, I enjoy Gail's comics.
Gail's amazing. How much did I wanted to ask you though, how much did the Captain run? Like, were you a longtime collector of Captain America?
When did I started a little bit before I think I started when seriously buying those when just before not US Agent when US Agent was first introduced.
Right. Yeah.
and then when he took over as Captain America for a while.
I think
I can't remember what his name was at the time. I just remember that his sidekicks were right winger and left.
Oh, it was the Patriot.
Yeah,
I think, wasn't it?
Super Patriot.
Super Patriot. That's what it was. Yeah. I think is that like around issue 300 or something?
Yeah, around there.
Is that I
bought the issue where he goes back to the Red Skull's house.
Okay, yeah, that's my first issue. That's my first issue.
I kind of followed Captain America for a long time. I think up until he turned into Cap Wolf, and then I kind of tapped because I didn't like the art anymore.
You didn't think Cap Wolf was cool? I mean, come on.
I mean, well, he was a werewolf, but I didn't like after Ron Lim's run on art that. Whoever, I can't remember who took over, but it didn't do anything for me. So.
Oh man, Ron Lim, so good. Yeah, he was I think that was my favorite artist at the time. Like that was the replacement to Byrne for me. It was Ron Lim on Captain America. It was just great.
He was a great fit for that book.
What is he doing now?
I have not seen him attached to anything in a long time.
No. I'm gonna do a deep dive and see if I can find what he's working on. Yeah, Lim was Secret Wars as well, I think, right? Did Lim do Secret Wars? I'm trying to remember.
I know he was on Silver Surfer for a long while.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that which is why I collected.
I think he did Infinity Gauntlet. He did the.
That's what it was. Yeah. Yeah. We talk about superheroes all day, but I want to talk about gaming. So I want to talk about. I'm curious about so your background was comic books, and your background was gaming. Was this always like the starting point to I can write my own stuff? Was that kind of how that worked out for you, or is that where that came from?
I think, like stories came at a real young age for me. I had a great uncle that lived with my family when I was growing up, and he told me like Tarzan and Lone Ranger stories and stuff. Like his old pulp stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so that kind of imprinted on me when I was a kid. And then at one point or another, he said, and I don't know if I was probably just harassing him like all day. And he's like, I'm out of stories. You tell me a story. And so then I had to make up a story for him. And that kind of like got juices flowing. And I was always a reader, and, I loved comics. And so I liked to draw when I was a kid. So I would draw my own superheroes, and it just kind of was always there. D&D was probably the big thing to make me start telling my own stories, because it like got me in the head of a character that wasn't me.
Yeah.
When I was just playing, and then I started running games and like building worlds and all that kind of stuff. So I was always kind of doing that, but I didn't write stories to write stories. I would come up with an idea for a story, and that was enough for me. If I got it into a game, that was fine. But I didn't like sit down to write a short story or write a novel really when I was in high school. That didn't really seem like a thing that was possible at that time. Like I didn't know any writers I didn't know any Canadian writers at that time, let alone Manitoban writers, let alone somebody from Morden or Winnipeg, right? Like it just, did not seem possible at all. And that kind of gradually I started getting exposed to a few more Canadian writers, but I still didn't see a lot of Canadian fantasy names.
No, that's for sure.
At the time. I when I moved to Winnipeg to stay in my mid-20s, I started working at a bookstore. And then I saw Winnipeg writers launching books every day. And I'm like, I can do this. And then one of the people I worked with had written a few books and published them. And he's like, so do it. What's stopping?
And you're like, Shit.
And
Yeah.
then, I mean, he was kind of on me for a while. Like, how many words did you write today? Did you finish that story? Did you submit to that contest you mentioned to me? Like, he was just kind of like,
nice,
not badgering me, but was just kind of accountable, right? Like, just kind of. And he ended up becoming one of my first readers and critiquers, and just sort of just by seeing that it was a thing that could be done, I'm like, well, I'm going to do this. And then I finished my first book, and nothing really happened with it because it was fatally flawed. But I finished it.
Yeah.
I went back and I revised it to try to make it better, and so.
So was the first book
I knew I could do it.
So what was that like? Was that first book fantasy or like what?
Yeah, it was. Kind of sword and sorcery, heroic fantasy, set in a world of eternal winter. That started out a lot more high fantasy, and then kind of as I worked my way through it, kind of got ground down to be very much like survival horror fantasy. After a ecological collapse kind of thing. It was. I still really. My first published short story came out of that world, so it was worth it for something, I suppose.
Sure.
But yeah, in terms of pacing and structure, I think that the characters were solid. I think the basic plot and world were good, but the structure of the book was maybe a little ambitious for someone's first go. Like, dealing with 6 or 7 tight point of view character arcs.
Ooh, yeah.
In one book, in multiple points of the world. Like it was a lot.
And that was your first book.
And that was my first book.
So you put a lot into your first book, quite a bit.
Yeah, that one took me 2 years to finish drafting, and then I revised it for about 6 months, I think, before I started submitting it places. But that showed me that I could write a book, and then the next one was a lot easier. And the next one was Thunder Road. So. Oh,
the next one after that was Thunder Road?
Yeah.
Wow. Not bad.
Wanted to do something different, and so I kind of stepped. I'm like, I'm going to do a tighter book with just one point of view character. I'm going to set it in the modern world. All I had when I started that one was like blue collar guy and dealing with a world full of fantasy stuff.
Yeah,
that was all I had when I sat down to write. It just kind of went.
Was it a bit freeing to? So you do the first book. It's super complicated. You got all this crazy stuff going on. You're like, this is a mess. Were you a little bit kind of like, can I do this? Like, were you having imposter syndrome at all, or? Not
really. It's funny. I probably have a lot more imposter syndrome now than I did before I got published. Like at the time, it was just like, of course this is going to happen. And
oh, really?
Oh, nice. Yeah. Like I had a picture of Nick Cave up on my office door with a quote. I'm paraphrasing because I don't know if this is exact now. I don't have it up anymore. But it was like, writer's block is just a profound lack of confidence, and I've never felt that, or something like that. and I was just like, oh, you fool, you sweet summer child. Yeah. But I don't know. I think when you're getting started, you almost need some of that confidence to deal with hearing no a lot. That's
yeah,
like,
sure.
Oh, I believe in this. It's going to find a home. I'm going to sell a story. I'm going to sell a book. And Thunder Road was the second easiest thing I've ever written. It was still tough to revise, but in terms of just getting a draft,
yeah,
I never struggled to come up like the story. It took me about 9 months to draft. I was still very early in my routine then. But 9 months to draft, and then a few months after that to revise, and I started submitting it. But that one felt easy.
So when you were doing it, was it along the lines that were you planning it as 3 books, or did you write so much and like, I better split this up here, or what? Like, how was that?
I was always planning that one to be a series. Initially, I had thought it was going to be a trilogy of trilogies. I thought it was going to be 9 books because 9 and
Star Wars. Yeah, 9 and 9. Yeah, I never even thought of that. Yeah, okay.
So that was my kind of original plan, and I had sort of the first 3 books were going to be kind of standalone adventures, and then the next trilogy was going to be next 3 books was going to be an actual sort of ongoing trilogy arc, and then there would be kind of a final trilogy to end everything that I wanted to say with the character. And then because I didn't plan out any of those books, that was just the structure I envisioned. And then because I didn't plan out any of those books, I wrote one line near the end of Thunder Road, and it sped up my timetable. And a book that I thought was going to be book 4 down the road maybe was like, nope, I'm writing it now. And that was Tombstone Blues, and I wrote that in 2 months because I just like that story showed up whole cloth, and I was chasing it on my keyboard. Like I'm like, I can't stop typing or I'm going to lose.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was the easiest book I ever wrote was Tombstone Blues. A much harder one to fix, but it was like the whole thing was there whole cloth when I sat down.
So it was harder to fix because you wrote it so quickly? Is that?
There was a lot of errors in it, continuity things. And there was occasionally there would be like, I know this happens, but I'm not ready to write it right now. So I would do like just a chapter outline instead of writing the chapter. I'm like, I'll come back to this. And I would, because I know what's happening later. I would just keep writing beyond that point. There was one, like structurally, there was one big mistake in it that I had to go back and fix where there was a character that I wanted to give a larger role to that after I had done my revisions to Thunder Road, that character playing a larger role didn't make as much sense. So I'd strengthened the relationship between Ted and one of the Norns in book 1. So they kind of ended that book a lot tighter after my revisions.
Okay.
My first draft. And so when I went back to Tombstone Blues, I'm like, it doesn't make sense for him to be renting a room at an old friend's place. Like the two of them should be together, and so it that involved a lot of, you're like, oh well, I'll just find and replace Jenny with Tilda, and it's like, oh no, they're 2 entirely different people. That doesn't work. So I ended up I'm like, it's not that much of the book, and it's like, no, I've got to rewrite 8 of the 20 chapters.
Yeah.
So there was a lot more revision in that book, but easy to draft.
Yeah.
So when you're
go ahead.
Sorry, I was saying when you're writing a story like that, and I'm assuming that every once in a while you get an idea for another story. Now, at that point, I'm assuming you wouldn't stop what you're doing. You would just kind of, I don't know, do you do like notes, or would you do 2 of them at the same time?
Depends on where I am in a project. Typically, if I get just an idea for a story, I almost always have like a little notebook in my back pocket, and I'll scribble that down. Like if I just happen to be out somewhere, and I'm like, oh, this could be the kernel of a story, or I overhear something, and I get an idea for a conversation. Like I write that down, scribble it in my notebook, boom, done, gone. I can come back to it if I need it. Very rare that I'll stop writing one story for another. Although I often will be working on a short story and a novel at the same time.
Okay.
Then if I get kind of lost in the novel or get bogged down, I've got something shorter that I can, actually finish in a week or in a month, as opposed to knowing like this. It's like with a novel, it's sort of I've got a year to do this.
Right.
Like I know how long it's going to take. Like even if I draft it in 2 months, it'll be a year before I'm happy enough to send it out.
Right. So it's a distraction. if you were to write
Yeah,
something and just kind
and
of not so much writer's block, but you know what, you've been working on it just to kind of change. It's like going out for a drive, just kind of getting just a different perspective.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'll use it to change the gears sometimes. Or I find that I draft better in the morning and I edit better at night. So if I've got like a drafted short story that I haven't polished, maybe I'll write my. That's what I've been doing a lot of the last couple of months is writing in the morning and then editing later in the day, or editing after supper and I did find. Speaking of day jobs, that I was always more critical of my writing after a day of dealing with the public. So, so it was a lot easier to edit. But maybe you're like too exhausted to be creative. But I can definitely find faults in things dealing with the public. So that's a good time for editing.
So you have a bit of a schedule that you normally would follow. You say you do your editing at a certain time of day and.
Yeah, I try to keep a schedule. I mean, not everybody has that privilege or that luxury, but I work best with a routine. If my routine gets shaken up, then I'll absolutely lose writing time. Last time I changed jobs, I don't think I significantly wrote for like 6 months because I was just getting getting used to a whole new thing. And then it's like, okay, well, it looks like I'm not writing on my laptop. I'm writing in my notebook on the bus now. That's when I'm writing. It's like, okay,
right.
Well, this is the routine now. So,
yeah.
What's it like right now? Like, are you actually one of those people stuck at home? Or are you back?
I am still at home. So I do, I maintain my regular work timeline, I guess. I get up the same time that I would have. Then I'm not staying up at all hours and keeping my wife up. Just find it easier to keep our previous schedule. And I write before my work time.
Okay. Yeah. I'm struggling right now. Like I've been editing this book since January, I guess, and it's strange. Like in my profession, I get busier, which is crazy. I get to work from home, which is good, but I'm having a hard time concentrating and staying on schedule. And I was going from editing an hour to 2 hours a day to editing once every 3 weeks. I don't know how it works for you, but for me, like it's killing me. Like I keep looking at it and I keep wanting to, grab my draft and go through it, but I just can't. I'm just stressed out right now. Like this whole COVID thing is like just knocks me on my ass.
I'm there with you too. I abandoned a book that was almost ready. I was in revision mode and I decided I wanted to add another point of view character to it. Would have entailed 10,000 new words, like not all that much in the grand scheme of things. And I'd already more or less kind of gone through the manuscript and been like, I need a chapter here and a chapter here and a chapter here. So, I know when they're going to happen and I know where they're happening in the book. So I know roughly what, this viewpoint character should be reacting to. And I just couldn't make myself do it. I had my laptop sitting on the table and I had my other printed manuscript pages and my notes and all this stuff. And I would look at them and then I would watch some bad horror movie from the 80s on Prime.
Instead.
It was just like, I'll just put this on and, I've seen this, a dozen times and I'll be able to write while, Friday the 13th, part 6, Jason Lives is on. And then I just watched the movie. And I did that for like weeks when I should have been writing.
Oh man.
And finally, I just like, I wanted to do something, and it couldn't be that. And I had this back burner book that was like, when you submit the other book, I'll allow you to start writing this one. And it's like, you really like that idea. That idea makes you happy. Why don't you write that book now? And so now I'm almost 30,000 words into that book, just crossed 100 manuscript pages. Not a ton every day. Like I'm shooting for 2 or 3 pages a writing session. If I get more than that, great.
Okay.
But it's just sort of every weekday, little bit of writing in the morning. And then if I've been hitting my quota, I take my weekends off and just relax and have the weekend with my wife. And
so you're telling me that's what I need to do? So the book I'm working on, which is probably the most commercial thing I've ever written, and I'm like, I'm not working on anything till this is done. And that's been my mantra the whole time. But now what's happening is someone who read one of my earlier books, and none of this stuff's been published. I'm just a guy that keeps writing all the time. I wanted to go back to my initial book. Someone on Twitter was asking me about it. And, well, are you going to do something with that book? And it was a book I wrote 20 years ago. And I started looking at it again. And I'm like, oh. And I just had this urge to go back to that piece of crap first novel I wrote and maybe polishing up. I'm like, I could polish this. It wouldn't take long. And then I just started having these grand ideas, and I'm like, no, focus. And then I just did nothing instead,
Oh, well, I mean, any other time I would tell you to finish the book that you're trying to finish, right? But these are kind of unprecedented times. Like everybody is overtaxed and stressed and, worried about, 1,000 different things, right? So if you can make yourself do it right now, not worth beating yourself up over. And
you can always watch Friday the 13th.
Yeah, but I mean, like if some other story idea pops up and you're like, oh, it makes you happy, write that. If you're looking at that first book and maybe that's speaking to you right now, and because if you're not making any progress on the other book anyway, then it's worth taking a look at the other one, that first book, and you're not under a deadline. If your publisher is not saying where's the book, then work on what makes you happy, I think. So.
And maybe that's some of it too. Like my whole thought with the current one is that, this is commercial. This is something I can strive for to get out there and publish it, self-publish, whatever I decide to do. But my thoughts, and like, I'm just going to finish it. I gave myself some deadlines, and then we had some health issues with one of my kids. So, I kind of pushed things off, and I got unplugged again. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'll find a publisher later. That was sort of my thing. And then I had started making approaches to Chizine. And that's when I'd reached out to you, and we won't get into that because I don't want to delve on negative stuff. But then I'm like, oh, because they had contacted me, and I'm like, oh, hey, maybe this is it. This is my drive. And then I'm like, I don't know why. I can't remember if I reached out to you, you reached out to me or something, but you said no or something, or don't, or I don't know if you remember that or not. But
yeah, I remember you reaching out about that. And
I got excited, and then I don't
remember where you reaching out was in regard to that publisher's implosion, but yeah,
that was, I don't know, that was weird, but I that really dropped me down, and then my whole mental state just was like, fuck, like, I don't know, just.
I spent all of November and December and fair bit of January just stress eating over the fallout of all that, and and how how hurt a bunch of my friends got, in the whole debacle.
Yeah.
And I was 3/4 of the way done the Graveyard Mine sequel when that news, and I was making a big push to turn the book in before the end of the year. That was my big goal, was to get
the end of last year.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And like I had the story, and like I knew how that book ended. I was already starting to like mentally plot out book 3 so I could do the foreshadowing in the second book. And I was a little behind schedule, but it was doable for me to hand the book into them by end of year. And then it was like, well, that's not going to happen. So,
shit.
So now, I don't know.
I think at that point, like, I think that's when I got my resolve back, and I did some just crazy editing around that time. I'm like, fuck everybody. I'm doing this for me. If it gets released, it gets released. If I release it myself, I release it myself. It's a different age now, I think, for publishing.
Oh, yeah.
You can kind of do whatever you want. And, my wife is like, well, you should strategize. You should go to a publisher first. And I'm like, fuck it. Like, I don't really care. I'm writing this book. This is the book I want to write, and I'm proud of it. I am proud of it at the end of the day, and it will get released one way or the other. And when I stopped worrying about the publishing side, that's when I was making my biggest strides. And I don't know. Like, I think we get bogged down on worrying about what's going to happen with it or where it's going to go. And it's like, screw all that. Just write your book and, be happy with what you got, and you'll get it out one way or the other. Like,
it's funny you say that, because Graveyard Mind was actually a reaction to some of the rejections that I got on Thunder Road about it not being commercial enough, because it was set in Winnipeg, and none of the American publishers had ever heard of it. At the time, a lot of urban fantasy was first person perspective and female protagonist, and
sure.
And so that was one of some of the things that I sort of not even what will I compromise on, but it's like, okay, I've never tried writing first person. That could be fun. I haven't written a woman POV for an entire book. I've done it for one character in a book, but not sole character. So I'm like, that'll be a good writing exercise, even if I never sell it. But I got to say, like, I've never had more fun than saying Thor shows up in Winnipeg and he's wrecking the ledge. Like that was a blast. The Thunder Road books are easy for me, I guess, in a way. Like, I get to throw in my pop culture references.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And, all of the chapter titles are songs. And so it's like, I get to throw in my own, like, kind of personal mixtape at readers, and whether they get it or not, that's beside the point. It's for me, right? It's just,
exactly.
It's a blast.
I think once you let go of all that stuff and just do it for you, I think that's when, I don't know, when the magic comes out.
And that's one of the reasons I decided to kind of give up on revisions on another project and write this other big weird book that I've been, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the camera. I bought this hand-tooled Cthulhu head.
Where'd you find that?
I got it at FanQuest. There was a guy doing custom notebooks, and I saw this, and I had a pretty good con, and so I picked it up, and so all my world building notes are in there.
Nice.
And I because I'm like, okay, you've got other stuff you need to do, but I allowed myself, when I thought of something for the world, I'm like, don't type it out, put it in this notebook. And so I index the notebook. So I'm like, anything that was like culture, I would like put with a certain letter, and then I have a table of contents in there. This is like the nerdiest I've ever got with like pre-planning a book. But I that was sort of my outlet for when I was working on a project and had other ideas. I tried to funnel them into that project that I wanted to write next, but I didn't let myself write any of the prose. I could only do world building. I could only do like character sketches or coming up with monsters, like nothing. I'm like, do not write any words of this book. You're not allowed to write any words of this book.
Yeah.
That's for later. And so now it's just, I get to do the fun part. I get to write the words. I've got so much of the world built. in a way that I'd never really done. I almost always kind of fly by the seat of my pants, but but this one, got to do some of that fun stuff. And
so is that going to make it easier now because you get everything there? You don't have to go back and go, shit, how would this work? You don't have to worry about that. It's already there.
Yeah, I'm finding it. I found it challenging when I got started because I had all of it in so much of it in my head that I didn't think I was organically getting information into the first chapter. And that's totally overthinking things. And that can always be fixed later and that kind of stuff. I've definitely hit the flow of it now that I've been kind of writing at it every day. But it was a challenge knowing how much I wanted to say about the world when I was just trying to introduce you to your point of view character in that first chapter, right? So
that's the tough bit. I don't know if you listen to Super Fault Science with Chomachek. Podcast he's got. He was talking about world building and how it's too easy to just explain the world and just explain the world. All of a sudden, it's like, well, where's the story? Like, it's all about explaining it. I thought it was a good point, especially the higher fantasy you get or the higher involved your world is, to just explain the world. And I think it's really good to do it in your notes and just, okay, I've got everything in my notes, and if I need to refer back to it, I can. But to have it be about the characters and the story they're going through, that's always my challenge. I'm like, but this world does this or this world does that, and it's like, but does it matter to the story? No, but it's cool. It's like, no, don't write for cool, write for story.
Well, whatever kind of subgenre of fantasy you're writing, and your readers are going to have a different tolerance for that kind of thing too, right? Like if you're aiming for the Wheel of Time crowd, they won't mind longer digressions in history, right? Like,
yeah, it's true.
You'll have more leeway with that kind of stuff in an epic fantasy, but yeah, you still has to be organic and it still has to serve everything, right? Like, there's definitely, I'm sure there's things that I'm going to end up cutting out of there or have to flesh out, and but yeah, it was an interesting challenge to have so much of it in my head. And what do I say now? Where do I choose to start the story, knowing how much of this world I've already built?
Yeah, where do you pivot from? How tempting is it to write something and then go, oh, this would be such a good game?
It's always there. Always there. I have roughed out a loose set of rules for a Graveyard Mind role-playing game.
So this is after writing it? So you weren't...
After writing the book, yeah.
Okay.
But it was... I roughed out the rules, but I didn't want to do any more than have a rough idea of rule stuff, because it was only one book.
Yeah.
And I didn't want designing a game to drive where my fiction went. I wanted my fiction to be like, okay, this is the world. And so that logically the game has to do this to be of that world. That was something. It just felt like there's concepts that I had introduced in the first book for Graveyard Mind that I wanted to elaborate on, and if I did it as a part of a game setting, it wouldn't feel right when I translated it into the fiction. I don't know why. It didn't feel like.
I know what you mean.
I ended the Thunder Road trilogy, and maybe this is a spoiler, I don't know, but I ended it in such a way that the only logical thing for me after ending that series was that it became a role-playing game.
Yeah.
And like that was, I'm like, the only thing I can do after this is make it a role-playing game. And I did that on purpose.
Yeah.
Was it made it so that it had a reason to be a role-playing game.
But then you don't have to write another trilogy. You can just let it be and just, let it live on that way.
I'm still writing stories set in the world. I don't know that I'll ever stop writing Thunder Road short stories, even though I I know what I think the last one will be. If I ever decide I get tired of it, I know what the very last Thunder Road short story will be, and then I will write that story. But for now, I'm enjoying like dipping my toes back in, whether I ever do another book or not, or another trilogy. I don't know.
Here's a question.
It's
when you write your books, if you had, like when you're saying a trilogy, normally that would mean, say for example, maybe this is totally off base, but say there's a show on TV, okay? So there's every time you watch the show, it's always about a different story, but it's always with the same characters in the same place. Now, the books that you write, do you write the books as a continuation or totally separate ideas, totally separate area? It's not like you've reused the same location. Do you do that, or do you just kind of, when you make up your story, it's always in a different place? It's always in a different planet or different, whatever
Different
area
setting.
that you're in. Different setting.
Sometimes, with a short story, it'll depend on how close I am to deadline. That'll drive a lot of things, which is why I write a lot of Thunder Road short stories, because I don't have to think about the world. Okay. The world is there. Even if I'm not using the novel protagonist, I know what the magic is like. I know what the monsters are. I'm very familiar with Norse mythology, and so it's easy for me, if I don't have a long turnaround time, to just go, boom, here's a Thunder Road short story.
Do you remember watching? Sorry, do you remember watching the Flintstones? Okay, and every time that he'd be driving his car, and the background would always, it would be different for a bit, and then it would be the same thing over and over and over and over again. So that the people that are writing it don't have to worry about that anymore. They know what it is. Yeah. That they have that in the background. That's a no-brainer. We're not going to worry about that. We're going to move on to other things, like saying the story. And
it's one of the reasons I set a lot of stories in Winnipeg, because I don't have to go far to do my research.
Right.
And just if I need something like weird and esoteric that I don't know, I can find it here. Mm-hmm. It was a lot harder when I set the third Thunder Road book in Edmonton. I had to spend a lot of time in Edmonton to feel satisfied that I got it right. I have a sword and sorcery world that I write in. And in that world, I have a city that a lot of stories take place in. A lot of times I have kind of 3 or 4 settings that I commonly write short stories in. Every now and again, something doesn't fit.
Right.
And it just kind of becomes its own thing. And sometimes that thing that doesn't fit ends up sparking its own, its own little offshoot.
Right.
I wrote a story about a magic Mennonite going home for Christmas with his estranged family, and now that has become this cycle of short stories that I want to write.
Right.
It's magic Mennonite.
Christmas one off.
So, like you said, when you write your books, there's some aspects of locations that you use more than once. I guess that, and for the readers too, if they're used to your books, and it's like a video game with an extra map on it type of thing. You get to the characters already, and you like a series, I guess you would say. But you don't normally you don't do series. You do your books, but they're not necessarily in a certain, what do you want to call it, events that kind of flow into each other.
It's not the 27th book in the world of, it's like Xanth or whatever.
Right. The Thunder Road books happen in sequence, but each is mostly contained. By the time you get to the third one, you pretty much need to have read the first 2, but you could start with the second book on its own, and it sort of kind of hits the ground running. But Graveyard Mind was imagined to be more like a mystery series. In my head, it was going to be a lot more standalone situations. with the same cast of characters, and I was going to grow the cast of characters. So I was kind of envisioning it more, definitely more like either Kelly Armstrong's Women of the Other World or Patricia Briggs' Mercedes Thompson books, like just dealing with, the setting, the world, the characters, but a standalone story for each as opposed to a larger arc. And there's going to be a slow arc of things that were happening over the grand span of the series, but I sort of saw it as you could probably pick up any of the first 5 books in any sequence and be fine. That was how I envisioned that when I sat down to write it. But I like the idea of little Easter eggs, not necessarily chronologically saying when it happens, but a reader inferring. It's like, oh, Ted is pissed off at Loki in this story, so it probably happens here. Or, okay, the roof has been blown off of Union Station, so this story has to happen after Tombstone Blues, or like that kind of stuff. As the setting has changed in the books, I'll write little elements of a short story, or little things for me that maybe readers don't care about, but I do, and it's sort of like, oh, whatever happened to that troll that he fought in book 1, and now it's like he didn't care anything about it after he finished fighting it, and now it's somebody's job to go and clean it up. And so I wrote a story about the person who had to go and deal with the troll. And it's just that's been kind of fun to not timestamp these stories, but put those little clues in for readers about where it happens in the chronology.
Cool.
Nice.
Very cool.
It's like a spin-off of your own story.
In a way, and it's almost like I'm auditioning new characters. It's like I feel like my protagonist, Ted Callan. I feel like I gave him the ending he deserved, and so it's hard for me to go back and write a novel for him after trying so hard to end his story well. So a lot of the Thunder Road short stories almost feel like I'm auditioning somebody to maybe you could have if there's going to be another Thunder Road book, maybe it'll be yours, and
maybe you're the trilogy.
Maybe you're the new trilogy guy. Well, so far a couple of them have got more than one story, but nobody has won a book yet.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Actually, I never thought of doing it that way. So when you're planning a game, when you're writing a game, what's your world building? Like if you're using Marvel superheroes as a setting, did you ever use a system to kind of create your own place? It doesn't have any Marvel characters in it. It's just its own thing. Or what's your planning there? Because it's writing in a different style, but I'm curious your approach on that.
Well, for the current game, because I decided to set it in the world of the Marvel movies, all of those movies have happened up until Civil War.
Okay.
And so post that, maybe it'll diverge if the campaign goes on long enough. I might have to have all the characters flip a coin to see if they survive the snap.
Sure.
We'll see. But I'm trying not to tie them too deeply into the movies, because that, it's almost like if you're running a game set in Westeros for Game of Thrones, what are you doing? Because you're not Ned Stark, you're not Jon Snow, you're not these characters that you, having read the books and watched the show, have seen to be important.
Right.
So unless you're going to totally diverge from the actual material the game's based on, I find those games a lot harder for me to play. I think this is what, if I'm running Star Wars, I like playing a scum and villainy kind of game.
Sure.
Where you're bounty hunters or you're smugglers or whatever, and you're kind of away from the rebellion, or you're away from the Jedi, or you're because otherwise, I don't want to have to explain what Luke Skywalker is doing every day. You know?
I think that's the tough part. Like, that's the tough part. When I started I actually started with Marvel. I didn't actually play D&D till I was in my 20s. But the first game I played was I picked up Secret Wars from Kohl's.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, what's this? It's a game, but I didn't have the rules. So we played it without the rules and kind of kit bashed it, kind of figured it out. And then later I'm like, oh, there's rules for this. So the first bunch of games I played were always, okay, well, it's this module, it's the Fantastic Four one, or it's the Avengers one, or the X-Men one. Like, I had all those, and it was fun. But at a certain time, because I'm a storyteller at heart, I'm like, this isn't cutting the mustard for me. And then I started playing within the Marvel Universe. But then I'm like, it is exactly like you're saying. Like, if you're starting off the Fantastic Four adventure and then you're diverging off, like, there's always a status quo in the comic books where everything always reverts back to the way it was. Ben Grimm, might become human again, but then he goes back to his rocky form. So I started kind of going off on my own and then building my own comic universe sort of thing. So I find, like, I kind of want to go back to Marvel superheroes and play because it's so fucking fun. But at the same time, I think just from a writer's standpoint, it's like, I can't do pre-gen anymore. Like, I gotta, go in my own world.
Well, my original high school Marvel group, and I didn't realize this at the time until I started going to conventions. We were odd from all the other Marvel players that I encountered in that we always made our own characters. And we would play in the Marvel universe, but we always made up our own characters.
So other people weren't doing that? They were just...
When I first went to PrairieCon and talked to people who played Marvel, they played as Spider-Man. They played as the X-Men. They played as the Fantastic Four. The one and only time I went to Gen Con, people were like, wait, you actually, like, make your own characters? They're like, why would you make up your own character when you could be Wolverine? And I'm like, well, my Wolverine is called the Tasmanian Devil, and he's from Australia, so fuck you.
Yeah.
It's like, he's basically Wolverine.
Yeah, he's basically Wolverine. But I'm free to go where I want with it.
Exactly, right? And it just seemed, and I've met other players since who did make up their own characters, but the first few groups of people that I found that played Marvel other than my high school group were all about, no, we're playing Marvel superheroes. We want to play the Marvel superheroes. And I was like, I've got 100 superheroes I've made up that I want to stat out. And, sure, I'm happy having them fight the Rhino, or I'm happy having them fight that my GM made up. But I want to make up my own character.
I remember at one point I was creating so many characters, and I had it was pretty good. We had a lot of players and stuff back in New Brunswick, where I'm from, that I actually made my own Marvel, official Marvel handbook with all my characters. I draw the characters and, frame it out exactly the same way. It was fun. And I kind of want to go back to that world at some point, just like, because that's the world I ran for 10 years. We ran it through Marvel Superheroes to Mutants and Mastermind 1 and then 2. And then we capped it off. And the funny thing is, the absolute last game we played in that 10-year campaign, I invited my future wife. She never heard of gaming before. She came in on the absolute last game. I brought back all the NPCs, former players that became NPCs. And it was this big, ginormous battle. Thor was there and Hercules was there. And it was this big fight in Winnipeg, because it took place in Winnipeg. And we played that session. I had 10 players around the table, because I brought all the old players back too. It was this big grand thing. It was the culmination of 10 years of gaming in one campaign. And then I think I was dating my wife for like a week or 2 weeks at the time. And then I capped the adventure off. It goes, okay, guys, we're done. That's 10 years. I'm done. And my wife is like, this is my first game, and it's your last one? Like, what are you doing?
Gee, thanks.
What's going on?
Show me the cake.
She was so mad. I thought it was going to break us up, but no, we got married after that. But now my wife is my constant gaming person. I always try to
Cool.
run something around her. And it's interesting, predominantly more female players now than before, which I really like that dynamic. It's from its storytelling perspective, I feel I'm getting more out of running a game, and it's helping me write better, because I could never write a woman because, I'm just a typical guy. So I really like running games with women in it, because it's like, oh, a guy would have done this, but a woman has a different perspective. So it's kind of fun. And I try to limit how many guys are in my groups now. It's kind of bizarre, but like, what do you find? Like, are you predominantly?
I predominantly play with people that I've been playing with for 20 years or more.
Oh, okay.
And so at the time, I'm absolutely not saying that women weren't gaming then, because I know they were. I didn't know any who were gaming in Morden when I was growing up playing. I mean, we tried introducing a few to our group, and we were all asshole teenagers, and it didn't work out well.
Yeah.
But,
yep.
Yeah, it just I am most comfortable playing with people I've already played with, I
Gotcha.
guess is the thing. And it's sort of it took me a long time of going to conventions and having bad experiences playing with strangers to realize how much I like gaming with my friends more than just gaming for the sake of gaming.
Yeah.
I love reading the books. I love the hobby as a whole, but I do have a hard time gaming with strangers. But I actually had a lot of fun. I ran a Star Wars one shot over Christmas for a writer friend of mine who was from out of town, and she was staying with another writer I know here in Winnipeg. And so it was two women that I've never gamed with before, but we were good friends. So that was
okay.
It
was a little easier.
Right. And both of them have done computer gaming, but not as much tabletop.
Okay.
And then one of the women at the last second, her husband was like, "This looks like fun. Can I play?" And so I had kind of like a day to make up an extra character for him and work him into the adventure. And it was a riot to have. Like, I had a couple of people that I regularly gamed with who were just huge Star Wars nerds. Yeah. And then two people who liked Star Wars but hadn't done a lot of gaming. And one person was just like, "I want to see what this is about." And we had a really good game. Yeah, it's great to see on more and more of the live plays that I have been following, more women playing, like visibly playing, like,
yeah, it's great.
And like all the curmudgeons who are just like, "Oh, women didn't play in my day," and like all these people who are like, "Yeah, I did, and here I am playing right now."
Yeah, it's great.
Kind of nice to see. But I feel like if I was going to start a new regular group, I would definitely be striving for more parity than I have. But it's just sort of beer and pretzels. These are the people that I and hang out with. Most of the women who were my friends outside of when I got into conventions and writing circles, they just weren't interested. Like occasionally we would try to run them through a game, and just that was fun. It's a fun way to spend evening.
Yeah, exactly.
To become a lifestyle, and I'm like,
it's like you don't understand. It's gaming. It's so important.
On books.
Now,
if you don't start game, I have nowhere else to put my miniatures.
Now, if you didn't have that type of gaming, and you actually had to go with PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, PC, pick one. Which one would you go with if unless you have one already? Which one do you think you'd more gravitate towards?
I would probably gravitate more towards PC gaming, just because I already have a computer and wouldn't need to get another system for it. I do have a Wii, which is not.
I don't know if you really want to call that. It's not really a...
No, I have. Well, I have a Wii, and I enjoy Wii Sports and Mario Kart.
Yeah.
And other than that, I have not owned a dedicated system since Intellivision.
Wow.
So that's going to date me a little bit.
Wow, that's even before ColecoVision.
I used to like rent Nintendo for birthday party sleepover kind of things, and I would try to finish Castlevania or like finish Zelda 2 over the span of a weekend, like that kind of, because that was the only time, all the time I had.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like not having those earlier console systems, I just honestly, I feel like video games evolved beyond me. Right. I went to the arcade one day and I put in a buck to play Mortal Kombat, and I'm like, what the fuck just happened?
And your dollar was gone.
Please put in another coin.
Yeah.
You know, like a buddy invited me over to play Halo for one of his. It wasn't even like a big LAN party. It was just like a few people were over, and we were just taking turns. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. My wife was there, and she's like, I don't know what I'm doing. And we're spinning around in circles. We ran out of ammo, and then we beat each other to death with our gun butts. Like we're just like, we're not made for these times.
But he's looking at you. What are you doing? Staring at the sky? You're dancing around in one spot. You're shooting in the air.
Yeah. I have a copy of Dragon Age that a friend gave me that maybe would be a good pandemic game to start.
Yes,
I feel like that would probably eliminate all of my writing programs.
Yeah, I think that's my wife's favorite game, Dragon Age. It is in terms of the closest thing to tabletop role playing. That's probably as close as you're going to get, I think. But I always say for people that play video games, like I do like video games, and we do play a lot. My wife's actually playing right now upstairs. But like, there's nothing. It's not the same as the thrill of sitting around a table, a bunch of your friends, rolling the dice. You got a really good GM running the game, you know, who's really descriptive, and he puts the lights down low, is the background music playing. Like nothing beats that. Like for me, and I'm always trying to up my game as a game master. Like what sort of things do you use to try to make the atmosphere a little bit better, or like what sort of tricks do you use?
It depends on the group. Because I've got some groups who just don't want music in the background. I've got some who've liked it. For the longest time, I did theater of the mind, not miniatures. I kind of like them now, but I never really did a lot of terrain. It was always, I tried to tell a good story and tried to give the players reign to make the world a little bit their own too.
Yeah.
I don't come up with a campaign in terms of here's how I see everything going up to 20th level if I'm playing D&D. Like I have maybe an idea of like, oh, this could be an interesting end boss, or maybe I want to deal with I want to do a political style campaign. Like it's more high concept, but not planned out who all my villains are.
Sure. And
I just throw a bunch of stuff at them in the opening 4 or 5 sessions and see what they're biting on. A friend of mine had found a thing, and I think it originally came from 7th Sea, called the Other 100 Points.
Okay.
So it's like sort of like you had 100 points to buy your character with, and then they gave you 100 points to spend in terms of the types of stories you wanted, whether it was espionage, military, romance, like whatever you wanted as a player to get out of it. And then so that your game master can tally all that up from the players and be like, nobody wants war stories, or nobody wants romance, or nobody wants mysteries. And then can sort of adjust how they're going to build their scenarios out of that. So I've started using that.
That's kind of cool.
kind of a ballpark. So I did one for my Marvel game, and like 50% of the points were spent on Slugfest. Like the players wanted combat, and so that means like at least every other session I have to have combat.
Right.
So it's good. That gives me a ballpark.
Yeah.
I found that kind of a handy tool. It's weird. Like I'm probably playing more now than I was before the pandemic, but I'm missing that face-to-face gaming because we're all basically using Roll20.
You are using Roll20? That's what we're using with Dylan.
I like it as a tabletop. In a couple of the games, we would have one or two people Skyping in from another city, and some of us around the table. And so I like everybody being on an equal footing on Roll20 a lot better than having one or two people only being at the table virtually.
Okay.
But definitely my preference is everybody around the same table. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I'm getting used to the Roll20. The last game I ran, we ran a Waterdeep campaign, which my wife's like, you don't have time to plan something. You really want to run a game, just run an adventure. And I didn't really want to. And so I ran it, and it was actually kind of fun. And I think D&D is actually doing some really good stuff now. A lot of the modules or like the games they have, gets your characters from, level 1 to 5 or whatever. And I've always been against playing that sort of stuff, but I actually had a lot of fun. The Waterdeep one was phenomenal. It was so well put together. It was really a choose your own adventure. Like, do this. You had 4 different villains, so you pick the one you want. That affects how the game's going to run. It was just really well done. I'm like, wow, like, is that what the pre-gen adventures are like nowadays? Because
I feel like they've gotten better even within the span of 5th edition. Like I played Princes of the Apocalypse, which is one of the earlier ones.
Yeah.
I didn't like it, but I feel like with around Storm King's Thunder, and I'm only going based on reading them. I haven't run any of the modules. I'm playing in a Curse of Strahd, so I have a kind of a player side view of that one. But I feel with like Storm King's Thunder and Curse of Strahd and Tomb of Annihilation and then Waterdeep, they're trying to make them feel a little more organic.
Yeah.
But I never ran modules as a DM. I've been buying the current ones to read, and I poach encounters from them.
Sure. Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, like that's the only kind of world building you're getting these days. Like there's not a lot of kind of core rule books coming out for 5th edition. So if you want new magic items, if you want new monsters, they're in the module.
Go buy the adventure. Yeah.
So I've been buying those for that, and it's just kind of neat to see some of the encounters that come up that will spark something and be like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do this and do this, and we'll take this thing from here and that thing from here and this thing made up, and that's how I like to. I think the only module I've ever run is Isle of Dread, and I run Isle of Dread in every single campaign that I run. Eventually, they will either get shipwrecked or get sent there, or
it's a good go-to.
I love it.
The campaign that I'm running for Dylan and Tina is it's actually based off the book that I'm editing, and it's like months down the road sort of thing, and I tipped at a buddy of mine who's been in most of my games. He said the best game that he ever ran as a GM was running it in his hometown. Now, my hometown's not Winnipeg, and I run a fair amount of games from here. But I decided, so he's from Reston, Manitoba, and he ran a game in Reston, Manitoba. And I'm like, this is the silliest thing. But he had so much fun because he knew everything. He knew where the corner store was. And I'm like, it just sounds so crazy. So the current game I'm running is based out of Shediac, New Brunswick, which is where Todd and I are from. and I'm having so much freaking fun. I'm putting on the NPCs come in, and I'm putting on the accent from back there, and it's just like fitting like a glove. And I'm having so much fun. And because it's in a small town setting, you can kind of get away with more. It's a modern campaign. In modern, it's a little tougher because you always have to worry about, oh, well, they just pulled out a gun. Well, you're going to get arrested for having, but because it's in Shediac of all places, I feel like you can get away with more. And it almost feels like a fantasy setting in that. And
the current
just having
or the Shediac we left back in 80s.
The Shediac we left.
Okay.
It's not the Shediac
totally
now, because
different
apparently
than what it is now. We never had a McDonald's or a Tim Hortons or back in that day.
Yeah, we had nothing.
Yeah, well, that's like the Morden that I grew up in is not the.
Oh God, yeah, that's drastically different too, I'm sure. But it was kind of fun, and I'm like, it's not gonna. How is it going to be fun to run a modern campaign in Shediac of all places? And I'm having so much fun, and I'm kind of seeing the spark in Dylan's eyes. It's like, okay, no, this is working. This is really, really working. And
it's fine. I had a bad experience the only time I ever ran a game set in Morden, but that was my own fault for choosing Werewolf the Apocalypse. It just became like a high school grudge match catharsis, and like my group of Morden werewolves were just like murdering their way through the town. I'm like, no.
But you've played in Modern before, right? I'm assuming.
Yeah, I played a little bit of D20 Modern.
I didn't want to, I'm enjoying 5th edition D&D so much, and I didn't think I would, that I didn't really want to go back to a 3rd edition thing, which is what Modern is. And now that, we've played 2 sessions, and I'm like, damn it, this is fun. I forgot how much fun Modern was. It's really well put together, and I was always trying to shoehorn Modern into like a 5th edition sort of style. And I was like, you know what? No, I don't think I need to. There's everything in there, and I can even do a little supers in there if I want. There's enough rules for supers, a lot of those modules. So I know Dylan doesn't listen to this, so I'll spoil a little bit, but there are some supers things that are going to start happening in there. And once I blow the roof off of, in the next session. But I don't know. It's like, what's your opinion on Modern? Do you like it?
I didn't play a lot of it. I was going to run an Urban Arcana game at one point. And then it sort of felt like, it's like, if I'm running D&D in the modern day, why don't I just run D&D? Like there's other, like it just felt like, there's other modern games.
Right.
If I'm looking for that sort of thing. But ultimately, most of my groups were pretty D&D centric. And so at the time of 3rd edition, I ran I DM'd a game up to epic level, and I played in a 3rd edition game up to epic level. And so once those campaigns kind of wound down and like 4th edition was on the horizon, I was kind of so ready to be done with that rule set.
Yeah.
And then when 4th edition, I didn't find particularly satisfying for very long. And so I went back to basic D&D.
Like 1st edition or 2nd edition?
Like red box.
Oh man.
Yeah. Like the Beckme basic expert companion master immortal, like that was what I started with. I preferred it to AD&D. I preferred it to 2nd edition. I liked 3rd edition enough to transfer an ongoing campaign from basic to 3rd edition, and then play it out to the end, and had a lot of fun playing it. But it was like 10 years and 2 campaigns basically with only that rule set. And so I was good and done, and I kind of was happy to go back to the simplicity of basic. And then 5th edition hit, and it kind of felt like that sweet spot for me of, much fewer rules like the old basic days, but still having enough complexity that I could do some interesting stuff. And if I wanted to be a dwarf, I could be more than just dwarf.
Yeah, I think the rules too, like from a GM's perspective, I think with 5th edition, like I ran a 5-year campaign. No, well, whenever it came out, like I ran a campaign right out of the gate with it and ran it. We just stopped like last year, I think. And what I found as a GM, you had a lot more freedom. You weren't like, oh, okay, well, you can't do that because the rules contradict what you're, going to try to do. Because 3rd edition was so rules heavy. But yeah, there's freedom. Is like, if your player plays really well, you have advantage. Roll 2d20 and take the best result.
Genius.
Oh, super genius. And I'm using it in Modern. Like, I want to use it in Modern. It's like, what Dylan's like. He's a really damn good player. Like, he gets right into character, and it's like, looks freaking brilliant. Like, I'm going to give you a +2. Like, that doesn't seem like enough, Like, so the ability to roll that second dice, I'm going to start incorporating that into the next session, because there's just so many things I'd like in there that, as a GM, it's just much more freeing.
Yeah, I found that 5th edition D&D hit my sweet spot as a player and as a GM better than any. Like the Venn diagram overlap of me as a player and me as a GM.
Yeah,
5th edition is more firmly in the middle of that diagram than any other edition has managed to pull off. So I really like a lot of what they've done.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to 6th edition.
Yeah,
I'm super content. I like the quality of the product that they're putting out. It hasn't been this solid.
Somewhere, I can't remember if it was on N-World or where, and they were positing that there wasn't going to be another edition. There was just going to be mild tweaks because of the explosion of 5th edition and how much more popular D&D is now than any time before, and with the streamers and everything else, more people have an idea of what D&D is, and so it'll be harder to change that with a hard rules reset.
Yeah, and I think too their approach to technology has been I'm not a fan of D&D Next too much, but you can use it on Roll20. You can use it on anything. The D&D Next thing, had I known they were doing it and I hadn't bought all the books, because with D&D Next, you have to buy all the books again digitally in order to, fully use it. And that was a misstep, if you ask me. Like, do you have D&D Next? Like, did you buy it or no?
No. I think the game master who's running Curse of Strahd for us bought it through Roll20 so that he would have access to all the apps and the dynamic lighting and that kind of stuff. I realized as my Kickstarter obsession was getting out of hand that I have to want the physical book. Yeah. Because otherwise I have a PDF library that I never open them.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
I like Evil Hat games for that, because if you buy the physical book, you get the PDF. Well, and that can be nice if you just want to reference, or if you want to print off some of the charts or whatever. Easier to just do that from the PDF than photocopying. But I hate making characters on a PDF. Hate it.
Yeah,
I like being able to flip back and forth between the various sections. I don't know. I would just always have to manually input things, and if I'm playing in a digital game, and okay, well, that's the way it's going to be, because I like my physical books.
So the one thing that I never thought I would do, because we're using Roll20 and because it's digital, I do like the ability of grab a map off Pinterest and pop it in there. I do like that. I do like drawing maps on on the table. It's kind of fun, the markers, and you're getting stains on your fingers, like all that stuff is kind of fun. But I'm kind of enjoying the Roll20 aspect. But one thing I started doing, which I hadn't done before. Are you familiar with Scrivener?
Yes, I don't use it, but a number of my writing friends do.
Yeah, I'm writing this book with Scrivener, but I'm using this for my campaign. Scrivener has, you can put in all your maps and you can have them all sectioned off, and you can have write-ups of certain parts of your D&D universe that you're building. You can have all the NPC characters. You can have multiple tiles open, so you can, look at the map, but also read the little preamble that you might have written to a, particular chapter of your game. And using Scrivener for that, I'm like, this is like designed for this. Like, it's totally designed for it. Because what I was finding is my notes, I would have like all these notes all over the table, and like, okay, we're referencing the fight that happened 2 years ago, and then you're trying to find it with Scrivener. I was actually able to find stuff very, very easily, and I'm starting to do my adventures not on paper, but I'm actually typing them out because I do type a lot faster. And using a digital way to play it, like, do you write everything out by hand for game planning, or are you typing it out?
I mostly type it out. I might make, if I have an idea for something, I might write it down in my notebook until I have a chance to transcribe it. If anybody ever actually cares to like pick up my writing archive, it's going to be a weird like mix of like actual writing and like,
gaming notes,
places that I can attack my players with mimics, like there's going to be all this like, this would be a fun way to screw over my group with mimics, or all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mostly just type it out. I've been doing for the Marvel game. I've been doing sort of an adventure outline, just in terms of that, because they've all got superpowers, and like 3 of the 5 players essentially can teleport or have teleport, and so they can go anywhere, and that's kind of a pain in my ass.
Oh, yeah, I'm not a fan.
So I have to just have sort of what I think the session will be, and then I keep like a list of plot points for each character of how I can fuck them over with their personal lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
In case they
keep that list too.
Book. And then I've got just sort of notes about kind of future big bads or future like things that could be happening in the older plot. But mostly I just kind of do it point form, unless there's. I've run games for a while, for almost as long as I've been gaming, so I don't write monologues for what my NPCs will say, but if there's a specific way I want them to say one thing, I will write that down so I don't forget it. Yeah. That kind of helps crystallize it in my brain.
Look out, it comes.
And for Marvel, I've actually found it useful because it's set in the movie universe. I've been casting all of the NPCs, and I got the players to cast their characters.
Oh, nice.
So then if I'm like, oh, this guy, I cast him as Paul Giamatti. I look at Paul Giamatti and I know I don't have to write notes about how to play that guy. I know what that, I know what that guy is going to be about.
Yeah, of course.
So that's been kind of fun. I might actually carry that over into other games, even if they're not sort of modern, just to kind of.
Oh yeah. Oh, it doesn't matter. You can still use. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing like a Bronx accent in Elven lands.
Yeah. I don't do a lot of accents because it's not great. I'm not Matt Mercer in that regard at all. So, but yeah, Marvel has made me change my prep from D&D. It's a vastly different style of prep I need to do. It's like it needs to be a lot more freeform, a lot more open. I need to be a lot more willing to improvise. I'm always willing to improvise in D&D, but I don't feel like I need to have a bunch of things potentially to throw at the characters, because you're a lot more in control of the world, especially at those lower levels. And by the time the characters get to teleport, you've been with them for a while. You kind of know where they might be going, and there's a lot more inherent dangers of them taking damage from screwing it up if they're just like, I'm going to go to this place I've only heard about.
Oh, you just teleported into the wall.
Mm-hmm. Enjoy your force damage, chump.
Yep. All right. Well, I can see Bro's getting a little tired there. I think we're gonna cap it off here. This is a lot of fun. I probably could have kept going for another couple hours, but
it's fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So where can we find you?
You can find me online at chadwickginther.com or at Chadwick Ginther on Twitter. Twitter is where I'm most likely hanging out online, but I have an author Facebook page. It's just Chadwick Ginther author. Don't do a lot of book promo on Instagram, but I'm there too. All my socials are more or less connected up to my website, so
perfect.
Easy to find.
Go to website first. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome. That was a lot of fun. We might have to do it again.
Would love to.
Corey wanted to be here tonight.
Talk music. I'm happy to talk music too. So.
Oh. You should listen to our CD.
All right. Yeah, you're in a band, aren't you?
Well, we were actually, but not currently. I got 2 kids. The kids made me drop the music for a little bit.
That's fair.
And I'm just running games. That's about it. Writing books, running games. I dropped the band, and my wife said you can only work on one project at a time. Band's done. Go back to your book. I'm like, okay, you're right. So I'm not allowed to do any more band stuff until the book's done. That's kind of the idea. So, yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. Okay. Well, that was fun.
Right. That was fun.
Todd, send me the file when you get a chance.
I will definitely.
Okay. Awesome.
Right.
Thanks,
All
guys.
Right. Nice to meet you.
Hey.
Nice talking to you.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.